Hello. 1 second. Welcome to an adventure. I'm just turning on the captions because I forgot. How are you all today? Okay. Captions should be on now on both channels. Welcome to Archival Adventures. Happy Wednesday. Today, I have some interesting materials for us to look at. And I probably should get going with the episode. I'm Anthony Wright Day Hernandez, Community Collections Archivist here at Virginia Tech. And this is my weekly live broadcast from the archives here at Newman Library on the campus of Virginia Tech. And yes, it's going out live to 2 channels on Twitch, twitch.tv/VTUL Studios, as well as my own personal channel, twitch.tv/Rogan27. We do that because we're here to share the info, and that way I reach more people. So, yeah. Hi, Hannah. Hi, Key Squared. It's good to see you both. Hi, Fluid Ann. I think things are set up and properly functional. I did the setup today, and it was like, I have a little bit of time. I'm going to try and do this other thing that I had been hoping to do with the stream setup, which was to try and put one of the chats up on the screen there. Ultimately, I want to get both of the chats up there so that I don't have to look to the side quite so much. I got one of them up there, and we'll see how it works. Let me go ahead and cover what we're going to be doing on the stream today. First, as always, I do want to start with the land and labor acknowledgement. So let me go ahead and switch us to that view so that you all can see it along with me. Virginia Tech acknowledges that we live and work on the Tudelo and Monacan people's homeland, and we recognize their continued relationships with their lands and waterways. We further acknowledge that legislation and practices like the Morrill Act of 1862 enabled the Commonwealth of Virginia to finance and found Virginia Tech through the forced removal of Native nations from their lands, both locally and in Western territories. Oh, Hannah, thank you. I did not realize that, but thanks for letting me know. We understand that honoring Native peoples without explicit material commitments falls short of our institutional responsibilities. Through sustained, transparent, and meaningful engagement with the Tudelo and Monacan peoples and other Native nations, we commit to changing the trajectory of Virginia Tech's history by increasing Indigenous student, staff, and faculty recruitment and retention, diversifying course offerings, and meeting the growing needs of all Virginia tribes and supporting their sovereignty. We must also recognize that enslaved Black people generated revenue and resources used to establish Virginia Tech and were prohibited from attending until 1953. Through Inclusive VT, the institutional and individual commitment to UTPROSIM that I may serve, in the spirit of community, diversity, and excellence, we commit to advancing a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive community. So we take a look at that at the top of every stream, just as a reminder of what the university's commitment has been, and so that I can sort of try and keep it in mind as I'm picking things for us to look at. Today, what we have is the Lucy Herndon Crockett Papers. These are going to cover a time period from 1940 to 2015. And let's go ahead and get some biographical information about who Lucy Herndon Crockett is. Lucy Herndon Crockett was born in April of 1914 in Honolulu, Hawaii. She was a Red Cross worker in the Pacific during World War II. She traveled as a speechwriter and secretary for the chairman of the American Red Cross. An author of 9 books, illustrator and designer, she wrote the 1954 book The Magnificent Bastards about her experiences with the U.S. Marine Corps. The book was later made into a film. And Popcorn on the Ginza about her time in occupied Japan. Later in her life, she lived in 7 Mile Ford, Virginia, which that last tag there sort of ties it into why we have it. Local history, local Virginia history is something that is collected here. And so the fact that she did live in Virginia helps to explain why these are here when there's no apparent connection from her to Virginia Tech otherwise. So in the collection, we're going to see there's manuscript versions of some of her published and unpublished novels, some of her illustrations and artwork for her publications, and let's see, a small group of personal papers and papers about her. So this all sounds really interesting to me. Hopefully it sounds interesting to you as well. Let me go ahead and, yes, okay. Thank you, Lord Portico. I couldn't see this chat, so I had not realized that you were all still in emote only. This is part of why I want to move the chats to another screen so that I don't lose them when I do something like that. Oh, and what did we say, Yuri? I'm glad that you all notice about me doing the land and labor acknowledgement at the beginning of every stream. So, and also, hi. It's good to see you. And so, yeah, the one chat that I managed to put up on the screen is the one that is less active, which ultimately is good because right now I end up looking to this side quite a lot. And when the other chat is over there, I don't always see when somebody posts. But now that it's on the screen, I'll see it. But it doesn't fix the fact that I'm always looking to the side. Oh, and yes, thank you, Mubot, for posting. I should actually do that. There. This week's destination, World War II era, as we explore the Lucy Herndon Crockett Papers. If you want to take a look at the finding aid that I was just sharing on screen a few moments ago, the link is there in chat, and feel free to look through it if you see something that stands out that you're like, I'm curious what this is, or I definitely want to see this. Be sure to let me know in chat, and I'll make sure that we get to it during our time today. Out of curiosity, you tried checking out one of her books from your campus library. I'm curious to see what happened. You only had one first edition copy of Popcorn in the Ginza in pretty poor condition in an acid-free box. Yeah, not the greatest for recreational reading. I'm surprised. That first edition in an acid-free box, I would imagine they weren't going to let you check out anyway, and that it would have been on-site use only, but I can't be certain. That's something I didn't even check, and so now I'm going to check. I did not check to see if we actually have copies of her books. We have these, I assume we do, but I never looked. So right now I'm going to do that. I'm going to look, I'm going to see if we have copies of her books, aside from the manuscript copies that we have. Was anybody familiar with her before I brought her name up to stream? That I would be interested in knowing. It does look like we have copies of her books, but they all also appear to be in special collections. They don't look like, it doesn't look like we have any copies in the circulating collection. Oh wait, that could also be because I clicked to limit the search to those, because I do that by habit. That's my bad. I hope that you're all having a good day while I check on this and just see items available for reference. What do we have in regular, non-special collections items? Nothing. So yeah, we do have, it looks like possibly her entire catalog here, but only in our special collections. You had heard her name before, but you didn't really know anything. Yeah, having it in the circulating stacks seems interesting, especially because it's in the acid-free box. Anyway, how about we start looking at, let's actually look at some materials. Those aren't materials, that's the desk. But I don't really know a whole lot about what's in the collection and where. Wait, you'd heard of Inglorious Bastards? That's not the movie it was made into. Was it? I don't think, no. It's, that, I understand why you might think that. Inglorious Bastards was based on, wow, this text is tiny. Usually it's fairly easy to find. I don't know that it's based on anything. I think Inglorious Bastards is just, it started as a screenplay. The book of hers, The Magnificent Bastards, was made into a 1956 film titled The Proud and Profane. It starred William Holden and Deborah Kerr. Oh, Miss Harry Ann, hello and welcome in. Yeah, we are just getting to the point where we're actually going to look at things. So I'm just pulling the boxes off the shelves, or off the cart. And I don't know, honestly, I don't know what's in these folders. I haven't spent a whole lot of time glancing at this, but let's see, book previews, biographical material, correspondence. Correspondence is always fun. Reading people's mail is always interesting. Personal notes, photographs. But then after some of that, we do get into illustrations. Yeah, this is going to be interesting. Welcome to the archives, kids. Just in time. Just in time. Got it. All right. Hold me to this. I just pulled out that initial section of folders that we saw that includes like personal correspondence, some newspaper articles, photographs, things like that. We are not going to spend the entire stream on the folders I just pulled, because there's more stuff to look at. Hold me to that. But might as well find out what is in book previews. I'm familiar with book reviews, but book previews? I'm less familiar with. Sorry, I took a moment there to have a thought about how I could better arrange things so that I don't lose the big view that I had before of the documents. So I don't know which part of this document I'm supposed to look at. Yeah, this one that is like a photocopy halfway between two pages, not certain what I'm supposed to be looking at on there. The next page, though, we get to some Lucy Herndon Crockett. So this is essentially a book review, and this is familiar to me because I work in a library, and I studied as a librarian. If you do not work in a library and have not studied as a librarian, you may have never seen one of these. This is basically a description of a book that is written to try and sell the book to booksellers and librarians. So, this is written by Ellen Lewis Buell. That Mario by Lucy Herndon Crockett, illustrated by the author, 181 pages, New York, Henry Holt & Company, $1.50. Wow, only $1.50. When was this? $1940. May 12th, 1940 is the other item in here. Actually, no. That is this item. Why am I looking at the bad photocopy of it? This is much cleaner and much nicer. The new books for young readers. So we're just going to look at a little bit about it. This is about an item called That Mario. I can even zoom in a little bit further here so that you guys can see the text a little bit better. Nowadays, they come as very excited emails, as well as in magazine pages like this. Yeah. That Mario was the elder brother of the remarkable Lucio, whose adventures with a Nuong Miss Crockett. I think it's supposed to be young Miss Crockett. I'm uncertain. That seems to me like... I know, Mix Harry Ann. I was like, that Mario, the elder brother of the remarkable Luigi, whose adventures with a young Miss Crockett portrayed amusingly last year, and suitably enough, Mario's story a much more substantial one is for older children from 9 to 12. It's Lucio, but wow. Yeah, that, I'm guessing it's supposed to be young, and it's just a bad typo. Unlike Lucio, Mario was remarkable only in a negative way. Oh dear. What a way to start the program with a negative critic's response to a book. Even in the delicious, sun-warmed laziness of a Philippine village, he was distinguished for his aversion to work. Dreams of a grandiose life in Manila filled his days when he was awake, and since no one had ever been able to hold him to a task, there was nothing to keep him from going there. Off he went, hitching a ride here and a ride there, but step by step he learned that the way of the good-for-nothing is not only slow, but hungry. Everyone seemed to expect him to work, and though he staved off that necessity as long as possible, he found in the righteous village of Bangbang a surprising satisfaction in earning a meal. Farther along the road, when he was detained as an official guest of the police, he was amazed to find that school was not so bad either. I honestly don't know. It's spelled bang bang, but I don't know, I defaulted to bong bong. Yeah, see, Mario, you gotta stick to that plumbing job. Bad character recognition. I mean, except that this is a photocopy of the original from 1940. So it wouldn't have been automated character recognition. I think it was just a bad typo that the editor never caught. So apparently school was not so bad either. Polite and honest in spite of his laziness. Oh dear. He was no match for less scrupulous folk and a good... I feel like we might need the... I know that the command is historical terms, but... unsurprising, honestly. It's a story about a Filipino boy and portraying the boy as lazy, avoiding work, and but slowly learning over time how to be more civilized. Not unexpected for a work about a person of color written by an American in the 1940s. Just truly not unexpected, but just, there. As we review unedited historical documents on archival adventures, we may encounter words and phrases or content that are derogatory, harmful, or wildly inaccurate, either now and or in their historical context. Please feel free to step away from the stream as desired for your own safety and well-being. I just felt like as I was reading this along, I was like, we might want to just make that clear for anybody who might be new here. Let's see. In spite of his laziness, he was no match for less scrupulous folk, and a good deal of his odyssey was spent pleasantly enough in jail. Manila, when at last he reached it, was more strenuous a place than he had bargained for, but after a riotous series of ups and downs and an involuntary venture in crime, he left with new clothes and money in his pocket. His return home was as startling as it was triumphant to a terrified family who could only believe it was Mario's ghost who said, "I have come back to be useful to you." Miss Crockett has more than fulfilled the promise of Lucio in this hilarious and original tale. She writes with a fine ear for words and rhythm, and from a deep feeling for the lovely country. The slyest touches of her humor may not be grasped by children, but the incidents are funny in themselves, and readers will know a great deal more about the Philippines and their courteous, easygoing people than they did when they started the tale. It is unfortunate that much of the unique quality of her illustrations has been blurred in poor reproductions. I stumbled on that simply because I have never seen slyest spelled that way. A typical modern American spelling of slyest would have a Y instead of an I. Yeah, I have a feeling we're going to get some more iterations of the historical terms note as we move into the illustrations that she made. All I knew was, hey, she was an author. And we have her papers. I did not know and had not checked what the content of her books was. Let's see, current biography. We already looked at some, like, who is she stuff. Quickly through correspondence. We can always return to it if we decide that there's more that we definitely need to see, or if we look at other stuff and determine we're just not super interested in it and we'd rather move back and read her mail. Trying to zoom out, but I accidentally grabbed the tab and pulled it away from where it was. What does that say? I mean, it clearly says something about spy. Hi, dearie. Hello, how are you? Slyest, she slays. Girl, circa 1850. Interesting. I can't read this, but that says spy. 28 March, 1962, 6 p.m. 1. I have just completed J. Edgar Hoover's Masters of Deceit and William Z. Foster's Toward a Soviet America. Neither book on U.S. communist activities, it seems to me, has much application to the situation today, as we are now launched on the final act in the Soviets' subversive attempt to take over this country, without the firing of a single shot, as it promises to happen. I don't know what you're referring to. Oh my gosh. You were saying hi to Deary in the chat, and I was very confused. This is just me being not following context because my attention is split like 4 ways. Two, Foster's book deals in archaic attitudes and terms, the toiling masses, the bourgeoisie, etc., and categorically confines communist objectives to the sole one of forceful revolution. 3, Hoover's book, manifestly based on extensive first-hand evidence, brought to light by the FBI, similarly seems dated, although far from the extreme extent of Foster's. Hoover makes a point of the elaborate machinations of communists gone underground, expedients no doubt once practiced extensively among them and probably still practiced to some extent, but I feel certain that red operators in our nation operate all but openly while still compulsively subscribing to unnecessarily devious means to make contact with each other, etc., in addition to their all but overt destructive activities, the latter wholly suspected by those under whose very eyes it is being extensively carried on. I am not familiar with J. Edgar Hoover's Masters of Deceit or William Z. Foster's Toward a Soviet America. If anybody in the chat has read them, I would be curious what you think of the comments being made here. Therefore, to anyone particularly interested in our communist menace internally, again, this was 1962, I would not recommend either book, as neither is sufficiently up to date or pertinent to our most urgent problem of subversion. What is pertinent is the following: that while much is being said and written about communists under every bed, few, if any, believe it sincerely, realistically. B, while many intelligent, deeply concerned Americans recognize the danger from abroad of the communist threat, an increasing number tend to view the real threat now as Red China, seeking solace in the farther, more unlikely danger. I think, yes, that is what I did this when I was younger. And it wasn't until I started working with archival documents and trying to read them that I realized how frustrating it is. Originally typed the word most and then wrote over it in pencil, just directly on top of the ST, wrote RE, which I'm sure worked for her at the time, but is less easy to make out for me. Let's see, 60 years later. That it is impossible for the average decent American in the average modest American community to believe that any of his associates could actually be communists or fellow travelers. Ooh, that is a phrasing and a terminology that I'm not 100% sure I know authoritatively, but from context, fellow travelers, I'm assuming, is a phrase used among spies to refer to each other, at least in the context of the books that they're talking about and the time period. Just based on context, I'm assuming that's what its meaning is, but I don't know. Yeah, I think it's communist agents. I think it means like fellow travelers as, because there's no way that somebody in 1962 was using travelers to refer to the Romani people. They would have been using a derogatory term that starts with the letter G. So I presume that they mean like covert operatives in this case. That each of these communities harbors any number of chronic dissidents, psychological misfits, paranoids, XGIs wanting to get back at authority, men retired from active life with little to do but hold forth with the authority of maturity on the way the country is, in truth, going to pieces and needs, above all, discipline. I love the little parenthetical, which lets you know that she agrees with them, that it's going to pieces. Former servicemen with first-hand experience of the wonders that just such stringent discipline can accomplish. Disgruntled politicians with no longer a chance. And local bureaucrats who would further the increased didactic authority of any bureaucracy in which they themselves could find a place. Let's see, many of whom, in addition to professional communists in the union's local, are ripe for any argument, persuasively and forcefully delivered, that what this nation needs today is a master plan, some sense of purpose and direction, and the man to lead us there. Wow. Honestly, I feel like that last paragraph about communities screaming about how I feel like that entire last paragraph, letter D there, could just as easily be about today. Key squared. Ooh, good. I think, not an expert, just read a bit a while back, that the term fellow travelers and similar comes from early 20th century Leninism. For those who supported the ideals of their movement but weren't actually involved. Interesting. And so ended up being a derogatory term in the mid-20th century United States for communist sympathizers who might be corrupted into giving aid or information to the Soviets. This is why I love this show. Because I looked at it, I was like, I think I've got the gist of it from context. And I probably, for personal purposes, if I was doing research, it'd be different. But for personal use, I probably would have just bypassed it and assumed that I understood enough of it to get some context. But you had enough information or knowledge, half-remembered knowledge, as you're saying, to provide some clarification. You're sure history doesn't rhyme, Lord Portico? A mere freelance communist. My brother is a professional. Oh dear. Oh dear. Let's see. I'm gonna see if a quick search will get me anything. Ooh. Oh my gosh, there's actually an entire Wikipedia entry on the term fellow traveler. The term, now, I've said before and I'll say again, there's nothing wrong with Wikipedia, as long as you're using it for the purposes for which it is good, which is general primer information where you're like, I know nothing about this topic. Give me an overview. Wikipedia is great for that. If you need more specific information or need to dig deeper, Wikipedia can be a starting point as long as you're going to the cited sources and using them for your research. Wikipedia is just for initial primer information. The term fellow traveler identifies a person who is intellectually sympathetic to the ideology of a political organization and who cooperates in the organization's politics without being a formal member of that organization. In the early history of the Soviet Union, the Bolshevik revolutionary and Soviet statesman Anatoly Lunacharsky coined the term paputchik, one who travels the same path, and later was popularized by Leon Trotsky to identify the vacillating intellectual supporters of the Bolshevik government. It was the political characterization of the Russian intelligentsia who were philosophically sympathetic to the political, social, and economic goals of the Russian Revolution of 1917, but who did not join the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. The use of the term poputchik disappeared from political discourse in the Soviet Union during the Stalinist regime, but the Western world adopted the English term fellow traveler to identify people who sympathized with the Soviets and with communism. So, Key Squared, you had an excellent memory with regard to the core meaning of the term, the only difference being that you had tied it specifically to 20th century Leninism when it is a general term that can apply to any political organization or movement. But otherwise, you full-on had it. Thank you for awarding points to Key Squared, Lord Portico. Let's see. I don't know that I'm going to spend a whole lot of time with personal correspondence unless something jumps out at me. Also, after last week, I'm like, unless I know I need to read the Spanish, I'm not going to. I spent so much time last week trying to get my phone to translate Bulgarian for me. I think a lot of this correspondence is looking like it's possibly, and this is just from me glancing at it, I haven't actually really read any of it. It looks like there's some correspondence in here about, or that is specifically for like research on like, so a number of her novels are military related and related to her time in the Pacific Theater, as far as what I understood from the finding aid. So we passed one where she was confirming the main crop of an area, and to me it looked like this was probably just verifying information where she states something or uses something in her book and needed to follow up and make sure it was accurate. This looks like a letter. I don't see the beginning of the letter, but it caught my eye because the letter head is Mrs. Theodore Roosevelt. Where's the beginning of the letter? And we may not have it. That's the thing. I'm looking to see if we have one, but I don't think we do. I think we just have, it starts in the middle of a sentence. Either that or they didn't capitalize the first word of their first sentence. This to me looks like page 2 or 3. Let's dive in and see what it says. Doubtless a tribal increase, as she has all the symptoms, but it is not yet official, so say nothing about it. Definitely the middle of a sentence. I don't know if you wrote Mrs. R when you heard of Quentin. I hope you did, but she never got the letter anyway. Helen and Mrs. A did, but neither Carrie, not so necessary when Helen wrote for them, nor Alan nor Anne wrote, and I believe Mrs. R felt it, as she had letters from hundreds who knew her less well. She gave me a lovely new linen sheet for Christmas. These 3 little girls of Quentin's are sweet little things, all with the Roosevelt long upper lip and the short Roosevelt nose. Little Anna is quite charming, and the baby quite sweet-looking, but the oldest one is not at all good-looking. Oh my! Wait. What was the euphemism for pregnant? What did I miss? Tribal increase? Oh my gosh, I did not catch that. You're right. That is a euphemism for pregnancy. That went like right over the top of my head, Key Squared. Oh yeah, definitely Gossip. I mean, flat out saying the oldest one is not at all good looking. Yeah, it's very gossipy. Sig and I stopped in to see Gertrude White Friday after a morning and lunch in the city, and they, Shiny and Gertrude, will be out here shortly for lunch, so this must not be long. And anyway, I have little to write of that. I have little to write of that is interesting. I haven't called Bowie, and I don't think I will. New York kills me. I was completely exhausted Friday night and didn't get up until quite late Saturday a.m. So I don't want to go there again if I can help it. I had to carry my small but heavy bag about, as there was nowhere near to leave it checked, and that was tiresome. Distances are so great in New York. I mean, I understand. That's why we put wheels on suitcases now. People will just walk all over New York with their suitcase on wheels. I have written Rose Exton to see if I can spend a night with her, and if not, I may try the Delarues, who haven't yet gone abroad, as she said she was going months ago. If not there, I will just go on through Washington or skip it altogether. This is a very particular typewriter. The uppercase keys are out of alignment, and so it's typing the uppercase letters nearly a full line above. Well, no, not really. I guess they're half a line above because they're hitting between the lines. Oh, Lucy, if you only knew. Oh, dear. Used to seeing this kind of cattiness over fizzy drinks at a drag brunch. Yes, very, very long tradition there. Wow. There should be letters for you and Mrs. Stanley in G when I get over there again, if they haven't got lost. Sig's hair is coming in again, like everything. I wrote you that she patted kerosene oil on the scalp with cotton wool and left it overnight, and it burned like the dickens. Next day she washed it. Please note, as we said last year, when we did a whole month on patent medicines, this show does not provide medical advice, nor should you take any advice provided in historical documents to be sound medical practice today. Please do not put kerosene on your head to try and regrow hair. Over her brush, she put a piece of gauze through which the bristles stuck. First, she peeled large pieces of dry skin from her head, and then she used the brush with the gauze to brush out the smaller bits, then pulled the gauze from the brush, cleaning the brush beautifully as the gauze brought out everything in it. Then she rubbed lanolin on the scalp. Now she has a lovely lot of hair coming in again. I wonder if it was caused by... I wonder if it was caused in you by that Tony wave, which is causing the same things in several I have heard of lately. I don't know what Tony wave is. It looks like a product name. It was nice of that Times reviewer to write to you. He is also writing a book on Japan and wants to pump you, no doubt. But don't let him in case you want that material for your own writings. I noticed that Carrie has been taking down the addresses of lots of publishers. I am sure that your letter was a good thing. Did I write that B. White was all in praise of your popcorn and said that she heard nothing but praise of it all around her? Helen found her copies, and I knew Sig had one, so didn't bring the one I was reading over. But Sig has lent hers to Gracie, who could have bought one. And I am sorry, as I was so fascinated with it that I read until the J in until made me add the word just for some reason, that I read until after 1 a.m. the night I started it. Perhaps it is just as well as I can rest more if I don't have it with me, or don't have it here. Heaps of love, darling, always. Mother? I think it says mother? Possibly not. That was my initial read on it. A closer look at it, I don't think it actually does. But I can't make out what it does say. I think that's an N at the beginning. I think this is a double T, not a TH. And possibly an ENE or an ERE at the end, but I can't make out what it says. Anyway. But was not worth it. Yeah, but apparently it worked. I'm curious. I feel like there's more information needed. Sig. Let's see. Sig has gone to meet the whites, is the handwritten part at the end. Sig has gone to meet the whites. But yeah, I don't think it's mother. It could be. But and with the way that the lowercase m is here, I could see making an argument for the uppercase m, or for that letter being an uppercase M. But there appears to be a letter here that would fall between what would be the O and the T. And then at the end, it looks like 3 letters after what would be the H if it was mother, which is why I don't think it is mother. I just don't know a name that starts with an N, has a double T in that position, and has a TH in that position, and has 2 letters here and 3 letters there. It's just, I would potentially have to do some searching. Also, a possibility, Mixarian, that it might say no matter. Well, and yeah, I want to be, kerosene does tend to evaporate pretty fast. And they said it burned. I would be curious. I'm guessing that there was some sort of, I don't know. There was some condition that had caused a problem that was preventing hair growth, but it was a scalp problem. And they used the kerosene to burn away dead skin, it sounds like. And then they used the brush with the cotton to get that dead skin exfoliated away. And then they rubbed lanolin on to moisturize and help to heal the scalp. It sounds like it was a method of treatment to remove scabrous or dead tissue. But we don't have the context, so I don't know. A handwritten letter on 6 August, but I don't have a year. We like reading people's mail. We really do. I don't want to like push too far before we start looking at some of the book things, though. So this might be the last letter we read for now. We can always come back to, as I said, we can come back to personal correspondence if we look at some of the other things and we're like, no, this is boring. Let's see. Dear Alan, I don't have a year on this. It's just 6 August. It looks like intended to go with this on, no, never mind. This is just an envelope. The folds in this tell me that it was not in this envelope. All right. Dear Alan, I'm up here visiting Dad, Hilda, and Eddie, and all I can say is plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. I should be able to tell you what that means, but my 6th grade French is failing me. Give me one moment. What goes around comes around. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Yeah. Well, so this, the automated translation translated it as what goes around comes around. But plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. Will I ever learn? First, an evening of Hilda describing how awful Daddy's snoring is. Then a post-cocktail. Bald Peak, of course. I'm not familiar with Bald Peak. Is that a cocktail or a brand of liquor? If someone knows, please let me know. Otherwise, feel free to look it up, and if you can find out, tell me, or I'll look it up in a minute. Snail Fest between... No. I think that's Snorefest between Dad and... between Dad and H on the way home. And now... Why don't you confide in me, dear? Our feelings are hurt. Oh, family drama. I think it's Snorefest because they mentioned just before that about how awful Dad's snoring is. And then partly because it's more catty, it's more gossipy to say Hilda was complaining about how awful Daddy's snoring was, and then to follow it up with, but both Dad and Hilda were snoring on the way home. And just looking at the letter shapes between here and there, I think this is OR, not AR. The only thing you can find on Bald Peak are country clubs and parks, hiking trails. There is, however, a Bald Head cocktail recipe. Interesting. Who knows? Because this definitely says Bald Peak. But thank you for looking, Hannah. And then a break. Just got your letter as I was finishing this sentence and almost died laughing at your comment. No surprises there. Of course, I can't resist commenting on Crockett character because there's so much of it. The only trouble is I don't mean it maliciously, and since you've been in limbo or whatever you're in, you're super sensitive, but I'm sure you'll recover, as I did. Block Island is nice when you get away from the village. It reminds... Oh, I told you that. Anyway, as far as visiting D&J, you'd be more than welcome, but I must warn you that the owner of the house, who vacated it for D&J, had dogs. Dick tells an unbelievable story about the condition of, or the... I think it really is of, but it looks like they wrote or. But regardless, maybe they meant or. I don't know. Dick tells an unbelievable story about the condition or the place when he went to look on it, or look at it. The dog feces are gone, but the memory lingers on. There was a Bald Peak Colony Club in New Hampshire, maybe referring to an actual place. That's a possibility. Thank you, Portico. I will hydrate if I reach off to the side and actually pick up my beverage. This writing is sometimes they're really hard. They look like they're going to be really hard to read, and they're easy because their letter forms are distinct from one another. And then sometimes you get one like this that looks like it should be easy, but the A's and the O's and the R's and the F's and the are all kind of the same. And so I will look at a word, and it'll take me a second to decide like here at the bottom. It's at it, but it looks exactly like the way they write their lowercase o's. Or here, this looks like an OR based on their writing. Contextually in the sentence, or does not make sense. Of makes sense. And given the way they form their letters, I would not be surprised if that was the word of. Handwriting is very unique. I don't do handwriting analysis per se, but just really have to kind of get familiar with somebody's writing, and sometimes you'll encounter somebody's and you just cannot read their writing, and you hand it to the person next to you and they have no problems reading the writing. All right. We have some correspondence here that is in Mylar, which we've learned from previous weeks might mean it's specifically interesting. I don't think in this case it is, though. This is just stuff about her house. Which, not to say that that's not interesting, but it's not about the books that she wrote or her time in the Red Cross or the movie that was based on the books that she wrote. So I'm going to bypass it for now, and we're going to look at other things. Newspaper clippings. Newspaper clippings are good. I'm curious if this will tell me when it's from. Block Island, mentioned in the letter, is Rhode Island. Cool. Thank you, Hannah. No date on this one. This week's personality, Lucy Crockett, got material for book from War Duties by Rochelle Gerson. Lucy Herndon Crockett got the material for her novel The Magnificent Bastards, a Farrar Straus book, while overseas with the Red Cross during World War II. And take it from her, quote, "Anyone who thinks it's glamorous to be one woman among 2,000 or 3,000 men is very wrong," unquote. Her tour of duty took her to New Caledonia, Guadalcanal, the Philippines, Japan, and Korea, where, quote, all the time you had the feeling you were under a blanket of apprehension. we Red Cross women did live under guard, she was saying the other day, and for very good reason. In that most desolate of theaters, there were two extremely warping things that affected the men, not generally, but in general prevalent. One was the almost total lack, and on some of the islands, total lack, zero, of women. The other was the monotony of the men's lives on these rotten islands. Really a very strange situation altogether, and consequently, when a handful of women were thrust among them, there was a most unfortunate and cruel spotlight put on us. Because, is this all part of a quote? I'm doing the wrong voice. I apologize. Anyway, because of both the monotony and this distorted life, all their thoughts and actions would become completely unnatural, and it really was not their fault. Men stood up to these conditions as they stood up to any conditions, according to the amount of maturity they had. Normally, you think of our boys overseas, and they were marvelous in what they had to do. The duty they had to perform was nasty. And yet, there was this other side, which was extremely ugly. Won't someone think of the men? Oh, Mix Harry Ann. That's interesting. And the title of her book is The Magnificent Bastards. So, celebrated author now shies away from public. Huh. It's really not their fault. They've been at war and can't control themselves because they haven't had any women around. Lucy Herndon Crockett, celebrated author, now shies away from public. Again, no date. Private property. Keep out. Signs are posted at the entrance to Herndon, where Lucy Herndon Crockett lives in self-imposed semi-exile. After checking to make sure there were no trespassing signs, I swallowed the cautionary lump that had lodged midway in my throat and eased the old vintage car on down the winding curved driveway to one of Smith County's more historic landmarks. To my right, and through a tangle of just budding tree limbs, a freshly plowed field encouraged me on. Ahead, there were obvious signs of in the process landscape work, stones placed in repeating semicircles on the just-raked hillside opposite what appeared to be a man-made lake surrounded by sculptured to perfection evergreens. Only the flowers that would bloom as summer comes on were left to the imagination. This early in the spring, that scene that spreads out in front of Herndon is already one of peaceful tranquility. Parking my car and mustering up my almost non-existent courage, I marched with determination up the walkway to the 22-room brick home once known as the Old Wilderness Road Trading Post. Rang the bell and turned again to view with admiration the scene that stretched before me. Behind me, someone was saying something, and I turned. Even dressed in gardening clothes, dark slacks, serviceable shoes, a flannel-plaid shirt, and a skull-fitting cap, Lucy Herndon Crockett is an attractive woman. Walking toward her, my thoughts were occupied with taking in the slim figure and the blonde curls barely peeking out from under her cap. Busy assembling my own impressions, I was vaguely aware of the fact that our eyes had met and held, and that Lucy Herndon Crockett was intent upon making her own assessment. Stopping at a conversational distance and dropping my eyes, with somewhat of a shock, I became aware for the first time of the fact that a blunt-nose pistol was pointed directly at my midsection. "You wouldn't shoot me with that, would you?" I asked, all the while taking in her index finger on the trigger. With amazement, I heard the calm, even tone of my own voice. For an anxious, flirting second, she held the handgun at hip level. as she continued to look me in the eye. Then, without blinking or lowering her gaze, she slid the gun gently into a hip pocket, all without relaxing her original hold. To a statement of my purpose, she managed to convey an emphatic no, without once uttering a word. My comment on the landscape brought the response, "It doesn't bear close inspection," as she turned to leave in dismissal. Clutching at straws and making one last, awestruck, all-out attempt for the interview I had desired for so many years, I began a halting, badly worded explanation of how my admiration for her ability to create verbal pictures had been born while reading her novel Magnificent Bastards. She turned, looked into my eyes again, uttered a soft, sincere "thank you," and turned again in final dismissal. Lucy Herndon Crockett has within her power the ability to contribute perhaps more than any other living individual to the culture and history of Smith County. She has written and illustrated no less than 6 children's books, Lucio and his Nuong. I don't know. Oh, okay, so that was the word earlier. The Tale of the Philippine Islands. I'm not familiar with that word. I'm assuming possibly a Filipino word. That Mario and another Captain. The Story of an Army Mule. For many years, Captain was widely read in schools throughout the nation, especially in the Midwest. Her juvenile novel, Popcorn on the Ginza, which she also illustrated, is, in her own words, an informal portrait of the occupation of Japan. 2 more juvenile books followed, Teru, A Tale of Yokohama, and Pongchuli, You Rascal, a war story about a Korean boy who attaches himself to an American Marine unit during the epic Allied retreat from the Yalu River. Her first adult novel, Magnificent Bastards, was published in 1954. It is an emotion-stirring, thought-provoking story of U.S. Marines and a Red Cross woman who served in the South Pacific during World War II. Wow. I'm going to leave it there, but I wish we had dates on some of these. Oh. Spanish memories. So these are just these are news articles that Lucy herself had in her papers. So this article about how somebody came to talk to her at her home and she held a pistol on them and sent them away was one that she clipped for herself, for her own history. Well, that's interesting. I will set this one aside. We might look at that one later if we want to. Some photographs. I mean, this is not just a photograph. This looks like an event flyer. Let me zoom out. Lucy Herndon Crockett Lecture Series. As with most event flyers, no actual year, and I don't know that this is. It's a lecture series. This might be advertising her as a potential speaker, because it doesn't list any dates at all. She must have felt quite the femme fatale from the description. I mean, it was a well-written article as far as describing an experience, but it was more about the author than it was about Lucy Herndon Crockett, but yet still was about Lucy Herndon Crockett because it was about how her self-imposed seclusion affected the author. It was a very interesting piece as far as telling a story. Spain, our newest ally. Spain, an exciting discovery. Spain, medieval anachronism in the Jet Age. Interesting. Those are the possible talks that she would give. The impact of U.S. dollars and Coca-Cola culture on a heretofore closed land. Lucy Herndon Crockett, as American as her name, with an incurable wanderlust, with a talent for relating vividly what she has seen, Miss Crockett turned her attention to Spain. This project involved 9 months of travel and concentrated study of Spain today and Spain of yesterday. The results are the colorful, provocative lecture listed above and an engrossing book, Kings Without Castles, published by Rand McNally. Spain's relationship to us in the future will be important and undoubtedly controversial. Modern Spain is a series of contradictions, baffling to the casual observer. To the knowledgeable, it is a country and a people groping for a place in the modern world. Strategically important to the Western Alliance, confusing for being a nation without a middle class, it is essential to know the conflicting elements which make up this anachronism. Lucy Crockett's book on World War II Marines in the Pacific Theater, Magnificent Bastards, won a wide acclaim and was made into the hit movie The Proud and the Profane. Her Popcorn on the Ginza gave us a vivid analysis of Japan under the first 2 years of American occupation. When she is not traveling, she lives in a beautiful and historic house in 7 Mile Ford, Virginia. Interesting. And we get a couple of photos here. So this one seems to be the main photo that people have of her. This sort of Red Cross uniform. It appears to, let's see, it looks like this was meant as an author photo for Popcorn on the Ginza, but then also has been edited for cropping purposes for use in something else. Like they wanted to get rid of the background, which is why you see, I think it's whiteout. I think it's whiteout that has grayed, or that they, I don't know. But they've marked edges, so they're going to crop it down so it's just the top of her shoulders here, and her face. So a full zoom in. I'm just not sure about why they needed to get rid of the background to do that. And then this large print. I think it's the only other photograph in here. But basically the same pose, same photo. Yeah, it's the same photo, just a crop of it. And someone has, like, it's even cut off. It says, "My beloved Reverend." Lucy Herndon Crockett, Herndon, August 1988. So, uncertain. Why this large cropped picture? But The Proud and the Profane, 1956, that is the name of the movie that her book was made into. I feel like we should maybe take a look at that. If we can. Let's just see what we can find out. So these appear to be like book reviews. I'll read the short one. So there's two of them here, and you might not be able to see the top of the second one very well because it is a photocopy of a newspaper. I'll zoom in a little bit here. It'll make it easier. Let me start with the one on the left, Blue Blood and Red Blood. The Proud and the Profane, Paramount, produced by William Perlberg, directed by George Seaton. Cast as another Red Cross worker, see above. I'm guessing I have read them out of order. Or not, I don't know. Cast as another Red Cross worker, see above, Deborah Kerr has her own share of romantic difficulties. Miss Kerr plays a war widow who is sent to New Caledonia in 1943 to help out with soldiers wounded in South Pacific action. She is proud, a Maryland blue blood. Miss Kerr at first flinches from mixing with the unwashed on leave in Noumea. But lo, here comes Lieutenant Colonel William Holden into port, an unwashed Marine martinet. Holden is profane. When the paths of the two cross, Paramount has its title and the basis for a contrived interplay between two dissimilar persons. This sounds like a mid-50s movie to me. Holden's aggressiveness first melts down Miss Kerr's unhappy resistance in swift succession. Then she discovers, 1, that she is going to have a child, and 2, that Holden already has a wife. Pell-mell, she tries suicide. Oh my gosh, I did not know that that was going to be part of the content today. But is in able-bodied attendance when he is brought back from combat with a brain injury which keeps him mumbling remorsefully about her. The death of his wife fixes up everything except the picture. Summing up, marine life out of water. Wow. That last sentence, like, it's all, let me tell you the plot. And you get this one sentence at the very end that tells you the reviewer's thoughts on the picture. In fact, it is the last 3 words of that sentence. The death of his wife fixes up everything except the picture. Brutal. Interesting. Apparently, that reviewer did not like the movie. Well, how about we look at some of the things for the books themselves? We have a folder of illustrations here. I'll set that aside. We might look at that. So it seems like her 2 big ones are Popcorn on the Ginza and Magnificent Bastards. Those seem to be the 2 that, like, everybody was talking about with her. And they show up here in this box. I don't even have to go to the 2nd or 3rd box. I'm just going to pull. There are a couple different manuscripts in here for them. Oh. I don't know what Jamaica tea is, but I assume in some way the papers have inspired it. Oh, it's popcorn flavor. Oh, wow. All right, Popcorn on the Ginza by Lucy Herndon Crockett. This is a typed manuscript, it looks like. I didn't look to see if there was a handwritten one. I'm just gonna check and see if the finding aid says. Illustrations in art, manuscript and typescript works. Ah, okay. Not for Popcorn. Popcorn, we just have typed copies. But for the Magnificent Bastards, it looks like we do have a manuscript version, meaning handwritten in this case. Popcorn on the Ginza. forward. And you can see the edits on here. This first sentence crossed out, then this entire paragraph crossed out, so that they start with today with talk of the peace treaty, but we're going to start with what they crossed out. Japan in the future appears destined to occupy an increasingly important place in American interests. Until recently, public attention has been focused primarily upon Europe. There was sound reason for this. Aside from the close blood ties, many of the countries were already familiar to American travelers, and the headlines from Europe have been dramatic. As for what was happening on the other side of the world, it was taken for granted that General MacArthur had his occupation well in hand, and that was all the American public cared to know. Indeed, Japan in the news seemed good primarily only for occasional comic relief. Today, with talk of the peace treaty and opening up of trade between Japan and the Western world, a new interest is felt in the land of the Mikado. The American taxpayer is suddenly curious about the nation whose rehabilitation he is now expected to underwrite. Almost every community has members who are making their families Japan conscious through letters, home, and souvenirs. And thousands of Americans are now returning after a year or two with the occupation to spread word of a strange people, a beautiful land, and an extraordinary Alice in Wonderland quality of the post-war Japanese adventure. Before Pearl Harbor, the average American, myself included, imagined Japan in terms of Fujiyama, Madame Butterfly, cherry blossoms, and that decorative, slightly hush-hush figure, the geisha girl. Superimposed on this was the wartime concept of a nation of treacherous, atrocity-committing monkey men, the slant-eyed jungle monster with a knife between his teeth. Again, I will note historical terms. Today we hear that the Japanese are sincerely sorry for the whole thing, that they love General MacArthur and all Americans and are cheerfully and wholeheartedly taking to democracy. Is it disallowed, Mubot? Why is the bot not doing it? I don't know what happened, Hannah. Thank you for trying. There we go. Yeah, absolutely charming, Key Squared. A lot of the most problematic language in here was in the context of her saying, this is what Americans used to think, myself included. She's not saying that's what she thinks anymore. I think she's presenting this as, this is outdated, and we know this is outdated. But back before the war, this is what people thought. So, less cringy than it could be. Hi, Santa Man. Pointing out that this was the notion of the Japanese at the time from the American perspective. Exactly, Santa Man. This is not her saying this is how you should talk about them. This is what the American conception was prior to World War II. Since my return from Asia, I'm just going to make that correction here because I'm not going to call it that, but you can see what it says on screen there. A commonly used term at the time that starts with an O and refers to what we call today Asia. Since my return from Asia, I am constantly asked, just what are Japanese people really like? Is democracy actually taking hold? Are the Japanese playing a waiting game? Again, a term that a term used here was in common usage at the time, is an abbreviation of Japanese and generally used in a derogatory way. Therefore, I'm not saying it, but you can see it on in the document. And can you ever trust one? I doubt if the answers are to be found entirely in reports from MacArthur's headquarters to Washington. Any well-grounded view on the success or failure of the mission to convert Japan to the ways of peace and democracy will have to be based also on hundreds of different personal observations, questions asked Americans in all fields of occupation work, relationships with Japanese of all types and interests. I would rephrase that just to add the word people. Relationships with Japanese people, please. That would be a much more respectful way to phrase that. I do comment, on historical documents as we encounter outdated language. Let's see. Besides the statistics on coal production, rice collection, and the number of prefectural politicians purged, it is useful to know how the occupation looks and sounds and feels to those engaged in it. The alliterative nature of prefectural politicians purged is fun to say, I guess. The major issues in Japan are in the radical changes in the new constitution as they affect the time-hardened Japanese pattern of life. In the weighty matters of economic crisis, overpopulation, labor problems, food distribution, and reparations, these are topics for serious consideration in the various offices of SCAP, Supreme Commander for the Allied Powers, that is, MacArthur's headquarters. They are critically dissected and analyzed in the lounge of the Allied Press, in the lounge of the Allied Press Club, over the dinner table at Tokyo billets of the technical experts, in cloistered suites at the Rank Swank Imperial Hotel, and at American Embassy luncheons for top-flight visitors. They are the subjects of several books already written, and of many more undoubtedly to come. But coloring all of these major issues are the countless personal relationships between conqueror and conquered. Possibly in the long run, these less formal factors will even prove the most important aspect of the occupation. So the reason why a manuscript like this is interesting to have on hand is not the content of the book itself. Because in this case, this is a published book. This book was later published. And granted, we've only read the foreword so far, but the value in having the unpublished manuscript of a published book is you can see the corrections that the author made, or the corrections that the editor made, depending on who actually did the corrections on it. I think this note is referring to the... I can't make out exactly what it says. I think it says, I made LC C on, meaning I made lowercase of these two. But then it says, or is she using it ironically, question mark? And then there's some initials. And it's X'd out, so I'm assuming the answer was that it was not being used ironically, and that indeed they should be corrected to lowercase letter C's instead of capital letter C's. This is a very lengthy introduction to the book, but also kind of interesting in learning some American perspective on the post-war period in Japan, which is not, honestly, something I'm terribly familiar with. I know I've encountered myself, I've encountered a lot of stuff about during the war, and I've encountered stuff about feudal Japan. But even with the European theater, a lot of stuff about during the war. Not a lot of content focuses on the post-war period and the Reconstruction, or in Japan, the occupation of Japan. I know my dad liked World War II movies when I was growing up, and they were all about the war. Nothing was about the post-war period, so this is sort of interesting. Few of us from the rank and file of the occupation forces are in a position to analyze with authority the MacArthur Revolution as it develops. But any occupationer with a curious mind and an observing eye can easily stack up innumerable examples of its obvious effect upon the Japanese. Our revised popular estimate of the former enemy nation will most likely be made on the basis of these personal impressions brought home by thousands of Americans, rather than by official reports and statistics. Similarly, informal relationships and impressions promise to a large extent to determine the meaning of democracy to the Japanese. What I have written is based on 18 months spent in Japan, originally where I arrived from Manila, but corrected to period. I arrived from Manila on December 1st, 1945, and spent several weeks in Tokyo, 5 months in the cultural center of Kyoto, and a year in the shadow of occupation headquarters in the Tokyo-Yokohama area. My work with the American Red Cross permitted me to travel extensively and to come in constant contact with others whose assignments took them to the farthest corners of the 4 main islands. In that time, I also talked with every type of Japanese person, from Buddhist nuns to taxi dancers, from members of the imperial household to members of the underworld. I have no ready answers to explain either SCAP policies or the Japanese character, but I have had the opportunity to observe how Americans find occupied Japan and the Japanese people. Sorry, I can't. I have to add the word people, because they're people. They're not just their culture. And because I do try to update outdated language as I read it. Let's see. And how the Japanese are reacting to defeat democracy and the Allied presence. If anybody was not familiar, most of what was there should be fairly familiar, but taxi dancers. If you're not familiar with taxi dancers, out for a night on the town, you'd go to a club that was holding a dance or whatever. There'd be a social event. And the men would go, like the GIs would go, and there would be women whose job it was to dance with the men. And they were taxi dancers. So in previous times when it wasn't somebody being paid to dance with the men, women would have a dance card and like jot down the names of the people that they were going to dance with at a dance. We have a number of dance cards in the collection. I could do a whole stream on dance cards. I may. But as we move past sort of that type of social dance, I mean, we don't ever fully move past it. We still have dances with dance cards today. There was this economic transactional dance. If you look at like the musical Sweet Charity, one of the characters in that is a taxi dancer in the US. But basically, women whose entire job was be at the dance and be paid to dance with the men. So I just wasn't sure if everybody would have been familiar with that term. Let's see. I've had the good fortune to participate in our country's first big chance to play God before a conquered nation. Yeesh. It is a performance compounded by equal parts of exhilaration, zeal, aspiration, pathos, utter bafflement, and at least 20 varieties of laughter. A performance that is not likely to be repeated again in our lifetime. Here, in personal terms, is how we're handling our unique role and how it's going over with our attentive Japanese audience. Lucy Herndon Crockett, May 1948. Oh, really? You were not familiar with taxi dancers? Yeah. So it's just... Yeah. I'll see if I can get a better description than my ramblings, but essentially, yeah, just a... a paid dance partner in a partner dance. That was a much more eloquent way to say what I rambled to try to explain. Hired to dance with their customers on a dance-by-dance basis. First appeared during the early 20th century in the United States. And when it first showed up, male patrons typically bought dance tickets for a small sum. And when they would then present a ticket to the chosen taxi dancer, and she would dance with him for the length of a song. She earned a commission on every dance ticket that she was given. Interesting. I'm curious. There's no citation for the final sentence. I'm reading from Wikipedia. So I would definitely verify this. Maybe it's summarizing something that is later in the article, but it says taxi dancing has mostly disappeared in the US, but is still practiced in other countries. So I'm wondering if there's maybe a citation in the article regarding another country, and that's why that sentence isn't based on a citation. And chapter 1 of the book, Our Turn to Play God. It's partner dances. So whatever the popular social dances were of the day. So this would have been, I don't know exactly the date that it would have started in the US. 1932, it's mentioned. Generally started around the 1920s. 1930s. But yeah, it would have been any of the popular social dances of those days where it was a two-person partner dance as opposed to like a group dance. So I don't specifically know which dances, maybe like the Lindy Hop or something like that, but I don't know which dances were popular in the 20s off the top of my head. Wow, the idea of this book starting off with, it's our turn to play God. We get to dictate what this country's going to be like. And this is the book that's for kids. But I do want to, as we're moving towards the end of stream, there's still a little bit of time, but we're getting closer. I do want to make sure I look at Magnificent Bastards, the other of her really well-known ones. And it said we had manuscript. I don't actually understand the difference in these notations. I have Magnificent Bastards manuscript pages 1 through 385, and then Magnificent Bastards manuscript chapter 1. I'm curious. I don't understand why there's a differentiation there, so I'm going to find this chapter 1 and see what is the difference. I have pages 1 through 69, and I have chapter 1. I don't know why they're different. Also, for once, the jazz music in the background is perfectly appropriate to what we're looking at. The Magnificent Bastards, Lucy Herndon Crockett. Farrar, Straus and Young, New York. Please return. Thanks. No idea. I think that's supposed to be someone's name. It looks like week, but I don't know. I don't know what this is. Because this is definitely thanks. That's definitely please return. I would have to dig into the employment records of Farrar, Straus and Young at the time, and that might give me some idea of who that was. Again, edited manuscript where you've got notations. That was my initial reaction too, Mix Harry Ann, was, oh, well, I guess they didn't return it within a week. I'm guessing, though, that they actually did. And that this then became at some point an older revision of the book and was just returned to them for them to keep. So I think originally it was, you turn it in, you get it back with edits. You're supposed to comment on the edits or send it back after having reviewed it. But then at some point, a new copy gets printed that incorporates those changes, and that is the one that's traveling back and forth for edit purposes. And the older revision would get returned to the author. So I'm guessing they probably did return it after a week. Or please return. I'm guessing they did actually return it, but then later it was just given to them. I don't know for sure, but that would be my guess. Copyright 1954 by Lucy Herndon Crockett, all rights reserved, manufactured in the United States of America. Library of Congress, catalog number, blah, 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 blah. 7 numbers to come when I know title. Oh, wow. Wait, this is even before the title? To JF, one of them. Apparently Jeff was one of the Magnificent Bastards. Or not Jeff, JF. My brain immediately just assumed it was Jeff, but disclaimer? Wow. Any resemblance of the characters portrayed in this work of fiction to persons living or dead is entirely coincidental, with the exception of one. Mrs. Alice Bowring, Mom, was, next to Admiral Halsey, the best-known personality in the South Pacific. After the war, Mrs. Bowring, an Australian, returned to New Guinea, where she continues to operate the Queen of Sheba gold mine at Wau. Her son is a barrister at law. During World War II, he was a flying officer in the Australian Air Force. Mom Bowring today enjoys the same excellent health that contributed to her exuberant personality when she had charge of the Red Cross canteen at Noumea. It's not actually that typical to start or to have in the beginning of a book this sort of disclaimer of these people are all fictional. I suppose it's used in this case because one of them is not, but is presumably fictionalized, although they don't say that. Apparently 6 parts. The darkening sky, brewing in the north, be still my soul, this madness, bloody ridge, and the magic cauldron? They're missing at least one letter in the word cauldron. These red notations are about alignment on the page. This one says align with top of and have on title page, I think is what it says. And they want it in 10-point Times Roman. Yes. And this one is very much, so this was her first book for adults. Interesting that they only list Popcorn on the Ginza and The Magnificent Bastards here, when Popcorn was also supposed to be for kids, and she had at least 6 works prior to Popcorn that were kids' books. Maybe Popcorn is like young adult, or like adult enough that they wanted to list it. I'm not sure. Wow, okay, so this Part 1. You can see here the original typed title was I'm a Marine. That was crossed out and became The Sound of Marching, which was crossed out and became The Darkening Sky. Originally meant to be in italics, crossed out. The behavior of men and women under strain is timeless. The picture of human response to unexpected forces is a part of the history of any age. It is frightening to think that no man can ever anticipate with certainty his own strength or weakness when faced by extraordinary tests, and that the selves we may never know might better remain unrealized, so that the acts we are most quick to condemn in others could be matched by our own. Other times of emergency have been more dramatic, other situations more trying, but the area of Admiral Halsey's South Pacific Command in the early years of World War II presented a peculiarly unnatural setting which contributed its own desperation and underlying violence. What man on a transport bound for those islands, which of the handful of women could foresee the effect upon themselves of the months ahead? So that's noted as a sample. I wonder if that's like teaser text or the inside of the book jacket sample. Reminds Carol becoming the price of salt to give it a more pulp. Yeah. Well, and the revisions, I'm not surprised there was revision to the titles. I'm curious. My brain immediately goes to musical theater and the musical South Pacific. And it sounds like this novel, and therefore then the movie that was based on this novel, also basically based on the same part of the Pacific Theater. I wonder if there's any like corollary, or our notes don't say anything about South Pacific being in any way related to this book, but 1. The morning the heavily escorted convoy loaded with Marine Raiders... The morning the heavily escorted convoy loaded with Marine Raider battalions eased out of the harbor of Noumea, tension spread over the town. Like a miasma, it crept through the half-staffed offices at Island Command and SOPAC and Comseron SOPAC, and a dozen others. Army, Navy, and Marine. More cigarettes than usual were smoked, paper clips twisted out of shape, countless matchsticks broken into bits. It made some men snarl at their closest friends, and others labor over letters home that were masterpieces of sentimentality. Kanakas in dark doorways did surprising Sunday business for their French masters in the furtive sale of the homegrown Pernod guaranteed to revolt the toughest boozer after the fifth swig. In the grassless, shaded grounds of the Hotel Pacifique, officers from outfits camped in the hinterland of New Caledonia and others from ships in the harbor, with nowhere else in Noumea to pause, leaned against the low wall or sprawled in the rickety wire chairs, disconsolately drinking beer out of sawed-off bottles and trimmed beer tins. And on an upper floor of the pink house, the Hindu-Chinese girl got into a hair-pulling fight with the Javanese Nauli over a first-rater sergeant they both claimed as patron, while three mixed bloods recently imported from up island villages stood by gaping. Huh. I mean, she's not bad at, like, narratively painting a picture there. That is well done. But this is, I think, more interesting. I'm sure the novel is great. From an archival perspective, this is much more interesting because of the editorial marks on it. And, like, you can see, if you're studying, like, the publishing process or American authors or anything like that, and say you get particularly interested in an author, sometimes you want to dive into their writing style and dive into things like that. And so if somebody was particularly studying her work or work of similar authors or things like that, having access to see the editorial marks and the revisions and sort of see how a manuscript possibly changed over time is very useful. So here, I don't know why, but at some point as they were going through, they wanted to change this sentence to more cigarettes than usual were smoked, paper clips were twisted out of shape, countless matchsticks were broken into bits. And so they initially inserted were after paper clips and were after matchsticks. But then in a later revision, they went and took those back out and returned the sentence to its original form. And I'm curious, I would be very curious, if somebody was to do a study of her writing style, I would be interested to know, was were added by the editor or suggested by the editor and then removed because of preference? Would it have not sounded like her authorial voice had those two words actually been in there? I don't know enough about her authorial voice to know for certain, but that would be the kind of thing that, in studying enough of her manuscripts and understanding the publishing industry well enough, one could make a determination and actually use that as evidence for the peculiarities and particulars of this author's style. That, to me, is what is most interesting about having these in a collection. Less so than the actual content of the novel. I think it's the editorial marks on the manuscript that are more interesting from an archival perspective. From a, hey, this is cool book about World War II in the South Pacific. I'm sure the novel itself seems quite interesting. I don't know that I'll ever get around to reading it, but mostly just because I'm not a huge World War II war buff. Overall, kind of interesting. I do have this other folder here, though, that claims to be chapter 1. And so I'm really curious, like, what is different? Why is this chapter 1 when that was pages 1 through 69? There's a handwritten note here from Lucy Crockett that says, Dunno whether to cut this or not. Chapter 1. They both heard it. Her arms sprang away from his neck as his head shot up, black against the patch of sky framed by the needle points of the long grass in which they lay. Neither breathed. Again, from across the field where the path came out of the woods. In one lithe moment he was crouching beside her, peering over the rim of the meadow toward the faint, unmistakable rustling. The girl heard the click of his belt buckle. In the darkness she followed the flitting of the white bandage on his finger, while he slipped off his canvas belt and started to wrap it around his right hand. Eddie, what are you going to do? And we've got some language. This Marine. See that nobody don't bust in here. Quick, cushioned, his voice that was never much above a whisper. Only now the laugh was out of it. Stay here, no move. Get it? He gave a vicious tug to her skirt. She realized her bare arms and legs and face must show up palely in the nest of deep grass. Don't move and ain't nobody gonna get you're here. And ain't nobody gonna know you're here. He eased from her, crouching close to the earth, hugging the slope of meadow away from its center, quickly lost against the thin fringe of undergrowth and trees. She listened until only silence lay along his trail. Silence, too, from across the field. Just her own breath, jagged in her straining ears. Yeah, and profane. I mean, it's just, I prefer to avoid using that word because it's not been used well in regards to mental health over the years, and so the C word with regard to anything that's not mental health, and like it's problematic. There are problems. There are better words we could use, but we're also 60 years in the future, so I'm not judging the language they're using. I'm just saying I'm not going to say it out loud on my channel. I have no idea how this is the same book. What we were looking at before was pages 1 through 69 of the manuscript for Magnificent Bastards. And then we get into chapter 1, The Darkening Sky, or part 1, The Darkening Sky. And we have this stuff about like a miasma. It crept through the half-staffed offices at Island Command, right? We've got that as the beginning. And then we have this other folder. Oh yeah, no, it wasn't the F word referring to sex. It was the C word referring to mental health. That I was just like, no, I'm not going to use that because I don't need to. So we go from the morning the heavily assorted convoy loaded with Marine Raider battalions eased out of the harbor of Noumea. Tension spread over the town. As the beginning of the book, right? That is like in the manuscript where we've got pages 1 through like 354 or whatever. This is labeled as chapter 1 of the Magnificent Bastards manuscript. And it starts, they both heard it, her arms sprang away from his neck, and it's like completely different. I wonder if this was cut. Don't know whether to cut this or not. I wonder if this was the original start of the book and it changed, and this was completely just scrapped. I don't know. I would have to maybe check and see what an actual published version of the book had in it. But right now I don't understand how this fits with the rest of the manuscript for this book. They're both good. I just don't understand how they fit together. They both claim to be the manuscript from the same book, but I don't understand their actual relationship. Anyway, we have been on for 2 hours looking through this collection, and that is the length of the weekly archives stream. So I think we're gonna bring it to a close. I hope that you have had a good time hanging out with me and looking through this material. I think it's been rather interesting. Before we disappear, I will look to see who else might be currently live that we can head over and say hello to. I'll also give you an update on what is coming up next week. Just looking to see who we might want to say hi to. I mean, there's always the aquarium. We do the aquarium quite often. And they have sea otters today, so that's possible. I'm glad you all enjoyed it. So what is coming up next week? I have the Samuel Herrick papers next week. Off the top of my head, I can't tell you anything about them because I don't remember. It's been weeks since I looked at them and put them on the list. Let me find out. Astronomy, science and technology. Oh. Is this The Day the Earth Stood Still? It is. So, yeah, next week we are very close to the 71st, if not on the day of, the 71st anniversary of the release of the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still. And the Samuel Herrick papers. Samuel Herrick was an astrophysicist, I guess. I don't know. I guess that's the term. He's generally recognized as the founder of the field of astrodynamics. And so there's some astronomy stuff he consulted on as a scientific advisor for the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still. And I have pulled the box that has that material in it. I don't know how much there is. I don't know whether it's any good, but I have it. The other thing that I pulled from this collection in particular is material from, I forget what it's, the Minor Planets Registry, I believe it was, is the term. So I pulled the Day the Earth Stood Still stuff. I don't know how much there is. We're going to look at that for sure. But the other boxes that I pulled from this collection, I pulled because I was really curious about this Minor Planets Registry thing that he was involved in. And I thought we would look at some of the material about minor planets. And so just, yeah, some of the planets mentioned in here are like Icarus, or Betulia, ephemerides. Oh wait, no, that's ephemerides of Icarus. Never mind. I was like, that's not the name of a planet. But anyway, seems to be quite a bit in here about Icarus, some stuff about Betulia, Geographos. We're going to look at that material along with the movie stuff about The Day the Earth Stood Still. So that's going to be the plan for next week. I'll be live at 2:30 p.m. Eastern here at twitch.tv/VTUL Studios and twitch.tv/Rogan27. And you can join me then, and we will look at that material. I am going to set up a raid, and we're going to pop over. We're going to say hello to Stephen Joys and do some watch a game. Stephen is currently playing The Wandering Village, and we're going to go say hello. So I've got that set up. We're going to just head there from both channels. Once again, thank you all so much for joining me today. It has been a pleasure. Hopefully you found some of this interesting or educational, or it sparked some curiosity for you. That is the whole point of this show. If you are really interested in the material and want to find out more, you can always contact us here at Special Collections and University Archives at the Virginia Tech. And until I see you next, I hope that you continue to explore history. Bye.